itv.com/news. A woman's been arrested over the suspicious death of the half-brother of North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-nam was targeted in an apparent poisoning in the Malaysian capital, Kuala Lumpur, on Monday. The woman was arrested at the city's airport, but there are suggestions that she's not the only suspect. Martha Fairley has the details of a death that is becoming an international incident.
She may be one of the women suspected of assassinating the half-brother of North Korea's leader, but the details, like the CCTV footage, are hazy. These images from security cameras at Kuala Lumpur Airport emerged as Malaysian police said they'd arrested a 28-year-old woman who was carrying a Vietnamese travel document. She was detained following the death there yesterday of a North Korean thought to be Kim Jong-nam, the exiled half-brother of Kim Jong-un. In South Korea, members of the National Intelligence Committee told journalists that the assassination by two women was a long-standing order from Pyongyang. And motivated more by Kim Jong-un's paranoia, rather than a calculated move to eliminate him as an obstacle to his rule. There has been no comment from North Korea. Kim Jong-un was seen at a mass rally to honour his late father. But cars from the North Korean embassy have been arriving at the mortuary in Malaysia, where the body is being held. Kim Jong-nam told medics he'd been attacked with a chemical spray before dying on the way to hospital. Post-mortem results may provide more answers about whether he was poisoned and the victim of an audacious assassination. Martha Fairley, ITV News.
Here, leaders of the Church of England will vote later today on whether to change its position on homosexuality and become more welcoming to same-sex marriages. The discussion has exposed deep divisions among believers, with some protesting outside General Synod meeting this morning. Well, our social affairs editor, Penny Marshall, is there live for us. Penny, what are the leaders of the Church trying to achieve with this report?
Well, Alistair, cynics and certainly their critics might say that what they're trying to achieve is to please everybody. But I think history has taught everybody, and certainly the Church, you can't please all the people all the time, as the protesters behind me show, and the protesters who were here vocally this morning and this afternoon in Synod. When the discussion takes place, expect passion, expect heated debate. I think there'll be criticism of the bishops again there. Archbishop Justin Welby has tweeted this morning that he wants prayers and grace as they approach this complex matter. The bishops are worried it's taken them 3 years to put these proposals forward about how they should approach the complicated and very difficult issue for them of same-sex marriage. And this morning I spoke to the Bishop of Liverpool, who said that this is just the beginning of a difficult process.
It is not the end of the road. It is not some fiat that the bishops put out and everyone has to be in line. And many, many people will be speaking against it, and I welcome that. And they'll be speaking with anger, and I welcome that. Because if we don't have the feelings together as a church that we really have, then we won't know the weight of opinion of the whole church.
Well, those speaking with anger say this report does not nearly go far enough, that the bishops are putting the sanctity, if you like, of the male-female marriage, which they see is taught in Scripture, before the principle of equality. They want change. This, they say, is just moving deck chairs, not changing the direction of travel.
The report goes on and on about wanting to change the tone, and it just doesn't change the tone. The report talks a huge amount about how agonising a decision it's been. Doesn't actually address at all the fact that it's been a painful situation for LGBT people.
Well, in some ways this is hugely consequential because the matter is so important, but in other ways it isn't consequential because it's not actually going to result in any policy. But policy change in the Church of England is like watching paint dry. This will go on for decades, and whatever is decided this afternoon, this issue most certainly is not going to go away.
Penny, thank you. President Trump's hit back at claims his former national security advisor had links to Russia, branding it as nonsense. Michael Finn resigned in disgrace yesterday when it emerged he'd lied about his conversations with the Russians. The administration's been attempting to get back to business today with a visit from the new Defence Secretary to NATO. Geraint Vincent with the latest.
The NATO alliance was set up in a Cold War world to counter the threat to the West from a nuclear-powered Soviet Union. Much has changed since then, and as world leaders wonder about the nature of the new American president's relationship with Russia, his defense secretary came to Brussels with words of reassurance.
The alliance remains a fundamental bedrock for the United States and for all the transatlantic community, bonded as we are together. As President Trump has stated, he has strong support for NATO.
While General Mattis was engaging in traditional diplomacy, back in the White House, his boss was busy tweeting. This Russian connection nonsense, the president says, is merely an attempt to cover up the many mistakes made in Hillary Clinton's losing campaign. But there's no doubt that a very significant Russian connection was made by the president's former national security advisor. Michael Flynn was forced to resign after only 25 days in the job because he apparently misled his colleagues over conversations he'd had with the Russian ambassador about lifting American sanctions. The White House spokesman is left to make stuttering clarifications in a seemingly chaotic administration.
The issue here was that the president got to the point where General Flynn's relationship, misleading the vice president and others, or the possibility that he had forgotten critical details of this important conversation, had created a critical mass in an unsustainable situation. That's why the president decided to ask for his resignation, and he got it.
Another component of the president's communication strategy is to make sure he's filmed signing laws which he says will create jobs by doing away with industry regulations.
All right, a lot of people going back to work now.
But with so much of Washington's focus on how much he knew about one of his closest aides' contacts with Moscow, there's little left for his domestic agenda. Geraint Vincent, ITV News.
Still to come, heading for danger. A new study suggests a link between football and dementia. And how good are you at complaining? More and more of us are doing it. We meet one of the best. But first, Theresa May has travelled to Bootle in Cumbria this lunchtime ahead of next week's Copeland by-election. It's particularly unusual for a Prime Minister to go on the campaign trail for a mid-term vote. Well, Dan Hewitt is there for us. Dan, the area has been a Labour stronghold, so how confident is the Prime Minister that the Tories can take it?
Well, the Conservative Party lost this seat to Labour in 1935, and they've lost here ever since. The fact the Prime Minister came to this little Cumbrian village of Bootle this morning, to this primary school, shows just how confident the Conservative Party is of taking this seat. As you say, it's rare for a Prime Minister to get involved in any by-election campaign, let alone a Conservative Prime Minister in a Labour heartland like Copeland. She came here predominantly to lend her support to the civil nuclear industry. It is by far the biggest private sector employer here, 10,000 people directly employed at the Sellafield nuclear plant down the road. Now, the Lib Dems, UKIP, Labour, the Tories, they all support the nuclear industry, but Jeremy Corbyn's at best ambiguous position on nuclear over the years has led the Conservative Party to focus their campaign almost solely on his position. It would be a coup for the Conservative Party to take this seat. A governing party hasn't gained a by-election seat in this country since 1982. It would be a coup for the Tories and a disaster for Jeremy Corbyn.
Dan, thank you. And of course, only the voters can decide. There are 7 candidates in all standing in that Copeland by-election, and the voting takes place a week tomorrow. Hate crime reached a record high in the months following the EU referendum, and that is according to new analysis of Home Office figures. It found that police forces across England and Wales saw a dramatic increase in the number of incidents being reported following the Brexit vote, more than 1,000 in some areas. Suzanne Verdi has more.
For Jules Walker, the abuse started as soon as the Brexit vote was in. She was walking down the street with her mum when she was called racist names.
My mother came over from Trinidad and Tobago in the 50s to the UK, and racism was rife. It was just an everyday experience for her. But she said that it felt like being taken back in time when she was called a monkey when the two of us were out together. And the fact that it feels like it's just the regression of those times all over again.
Latest figures from police forces in England and Wales show hate crimes reaching record levels in the 3 months after the Brexit vote. The highest number of reports were in forces in our biggest cities. In London, Manchester and West Yorkshire, more than 1,000 hate crimes were reported in each area. Rural areas were affected too. Dorset saw 104 crimes reported, up 100%. Only 4 out of 44 forces reported a decrease. Police say the rise is down to increased awareness and reporting, but many also believe the Brexit vote has helped to legitimise racial aggression. However, UKIP leader Paul Nuttall has said that such incidents have been overblown in an attempt to rubbish Brexit.
There is no doubt in my mind that it has emboldened a tiny minority of people and given them permission to say things that would have been unthinkable a year ago and taking us back to the 1950s. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to stand up to racism and prejudice wherever we find it and wherever we see it.
Human rights organisations fear the number of hate crimes could rise further as the Brexit negotiations get underway. Suzanne Verdi, ITV News.
Former TV presenter Rolf Harris will face a retrial on 3 sex offence charges and 1 new count. Comes after a jury found the Australian not guilty of the 3 assaults last week. The 86-year-old pleaded not guilty to the new charge. A record number of people are in work after another fall in unemployment put the jobless total at an 11-year low. Average earnings rose 2.6%. That's faster than the rate of inflation, but the rate is slowing. And the Olympic cycling champions Laura and Jason Kenny have announced that they're expecting their first baby. The couple announced it with a picture on social media, 2 adult bicycles alongside a child's bike. Now, a potential link between dementia and heading a football has been confirmed by a group of retired footballers for the first time. Scientists say the results prove that more research is urgently needed to look at the risk to players and allow measures to be put in place to protect them from long-term damage. Olivia Kinsley has the details.
Jeff Astle was to many a legend, the star England striker who scored 174 league goals. But he died with dementia so severe he didn't even know he'd ever been a footballer. His family have always believed it was caused by brain damage from heading footballs.
It broke your heart because everything he'd won in football, in effect had taken away from him with this dreadful illness. He knew nothing at all about anything. He used to sit towards the end in his own little world.
Now there is the first tentative evidence of a scientific link. Researchers at UCL studied the brains of 14 former players and found that 6 of them had suffered from membrane tears which have been linked with repetitive brain trauma. They'd all been playing football for an average of 26 years, beginning from when they were children or teenagers.
Throughout their 20 years or so career, they would have headed the ball thousands of times. But other than that, footballers are also exposed to other head impacts as well, including head collisions, head to player, head to trunk, head to goal post, or head to ground. So these are also repetitive head impacts.
The Football Association have welcomed the study, saying they hope it will lead to more detailed research. The scientists involved say they'll next aim for a larger study, looking at dementia more widely in football and for more solid evidence that it's caused by heading balls. Olivia Kinsley, ITV News.
Finally, consumers are getting more frustrated with poor services, with complaints to the Ombudsman jumping to 55 million over the last year. Now, the Ombudsman's released figures showing a staggering 60% of people feel disillusioned and resigned to poor service across different industries. Shops top the list, accounting for nearly a quarter of all complaints. 13% of people complained about phone services, and complaints about energy costs and provision about their accounts have fallen. Sorry, that's for 10%, while transport only made up 7%. The study found that 1 in 5 rail passengers kind of expected bad service. Well, one woman who has made a name for herself in the art of making herself heard is Helen Dewdney, who runs the Complaining Cow website. That's your
yes.
nomenclature, nothing to do with me. Are there basic rules for a successful complaint?
Absolutely, absolutely. Know your rights. That's what people tend not to do. They don't find out their rights. That's usually the Consumer Rights Act 2015. Be very clear. Email so that you've got a record of what your complaint is. Make sure you're objective in that. Be clear of your reference numbers, dates that you bought things, when things happened, how they've broken the law, what you want to happen and what you will do if you don't get your satisfactory response.
If you end up on the phone or face-to-face in a shop or a railway station, whatever, how do you balance charm with anger?
I personally don't do it very well, which is why I also do it in writing.
You're a bit more on the angry side.
Yeah, which is not good because you lose the argument that way. But when you have got to do it face-to-face, if you're in a restaurant or whatever, you're on the phone, it's just a case of trying to keep calm and keep back and make sure that you get all the information across. You don't want to be walking away thinking, wish I'd said that, which, of course, in an email you can do.
Yeah. I mean, it used to be joking amongst kids that they'd send a half-eaten bar of chocolate back because they get a brand new one back. Is this about making a few pennies or is it a point of principle for you?
No, it's certainly a point of principle for me. I've taken, a supermarket to court for 80 quid and I'm complaining to a CEO on behalf of my mum for £5 postage because it's about the principle of the thing. It's a breach of the Consumer Rights Act and you're entitled to your money back, so get it, because the more people who complain, then the companies will have to improve their service.
10 seconds, and I warned you we'd fall off the end if we didn't finish on time. Who, if anyone out there, shops, train services, whatever, who's getting it? Who's understanding your point?
What, companies-wise or consumer-wise? Companies-wise, I don't think any of them are particularly. You'll get the odd one here and there, but generally, telecoms for me are the worst. They are dreadful, and I hear that a lot. So I don't think anyone's getting it right, really.
Complaining cow continues.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Helen, good of you to come in. Thank you very much indeed. That is it. We are back at 6:30. Until then, a very good afternoon to you. Bye-bye.